In this video, I'm going to teach you the 29 questions you can use to produce amazing results for your clients as a transformational coach. And it's actually way more than 29. We added a bunch of questions during our discussion. And if you don't understand the power of and how to use these kinds of questions, then you just can't create the kind of transformation in your clients that not only do you want to create, but will make you a magnetic coach, give you much more confidence, and obviously have your clients telling other people about you, so you'll still get a lot of referrals. It's the most powerful way to build your coaching business, which is to become a really, really good coach. Now, I've been coaching for 15 plus years. I've coached hundreds of people one-on-one. I've coached thousands and thousands of people in groups and in our certification programs. We've made millions of dollars in our company, and these are the questions that are the foundational components of all of that. Make sure you stick around to the end, because the last thing that we talk about is so critical to end one of the most common and most destructive disempowering patterns for yourself and for your clients.
Subscribe to the channel.
We're talking about questions in this video, and one of the things that we believe is that questioning is just about everything when it comes to coaching. It's critical if you understand that the way we hold ourselves back is essentially with all the things that we've piled on top of ourselves, whether it's beliefs, identities, all the conflicts that are going on, all the protective mechanisms, our sabotage behaviors. And if we understand that transformational coaching is really about removing all that stuff, then the best way to remove it is through questions. And the cool thing about that is, if you just become a questioning master, you don't have to bring all the answers because the client has the answers. And so in this video, we're going to really break down a bunch of different ways to question people and help them change their lives. I joke a little bit, or I laugh a little bit, because in real life, like if you do this in your relationships and you just, unleash this questioning everywhere in the world, you're going to be really annoying. So this is a tool that you got to sort of temper a little bit. You have to use when appropriate, and we suggest that you do this when somebody has paid you to coach them. This, truthfully, all jokes aside, this can drive a wedge in relationships if you just get all coachy on people. I know I've experienced that. I know Michelle's experienced that. And so use it when it's appropriate. And the more ruthless we are and rigid with language, the more powerful of a coach we're going to be. So we're going to break down a bunch of different questions here, but it's really more about the philosophy of questioning is what I want you to get out of this particular video. And I'm going to be teaching right out of our big manual that we teach at our 5-day in-person ECCP event. Actually, this is in our online is it in our online program?
It is in our online program as well.
So it's in our online program, as well as we go deeper with it in our 5-day event too. So this is essentially going to be a training session, just like we do in our certification programs. And one of the things we talk about in our certification programs is how to become a language cop. If you can be a language cop, you can not just be rigid with the idea of questioning, but know what to look for. Know that language is a direct line to people's belief patterns and belief systems. And since we don't tend to speak consciously, if you listen as a coach to people's language with rigidity, they're essentially going to be giving you just a full-blown look into not just what they believe, but what conflicts they have. And we can pick apart the language with the intention of transformation, not with the intention of pissing anybody off or really irritating folks, although it could end up being irritating. We'll talk a little bit about that at least as we go through here. So is there anything you want to add, Michelle, before we dive in here?
Yeah, I love the word ruthless. That felt so good to me. And when you were speaking about being a language cop, it was almost the word that came to mind for me was like a detective, right? Like I'm really going out like as this, language cop on this detective mission to really search out and figure out how I can poke holes, right? You spoke, I believe, to the layers, right, that we all carry around and that we have with us. And if I see myself as the person that's going out there kind of hunting out and trying to like scrape away everything that's not that person and poke holes in the layers and in the stories that they're carrying, and it's for their liberation, right? Not for me to be a jerk or another bad word, but it's to set them free. That makes me excited, and that is what gives me permission to be ruthless in this questioning. I love that word so much.
Ruthless detective work. So if we are ruthless detectives, we can absolutely help people shift their whole life. So the way this is going to work is Michelle's going to not ask questions, but she's going to make some statements. And then I will give some possible responses to the particular statement that she made. And what I want you to be paying attention to is how can we challenge language? And we'll unpack some of these as we go along, I'm sure. So go ahead, Michelle. We'll just start off with these questions or these statements.
You don't like him.
How do you know I don't like him? Or what would it look like if I did like him?
It's good to eat 5 vegetables and fruits every day.
Says who? Why 5? Why not 7? Why not 3? Where is it written that we need to eat 5 fruits and vegetables a day? So again, all we're doing is challenging the language just to expose conflict or to give the client an opportunity to actually justify what they say and justify what their beliefs are. So this is one of my favorite ones. I know this is one I use all the time. It's just anytime that we hear some kind of an assertion like that, this is the way we should do it. It's just question the source. Who says that? On what page is that written in the book? What book says that, or what book holds all these rules for human behavior? Questioning the source, I would say most often exposes the fact that there is no source or the source is questionable in itself.
It's so annoying.
You speak as though that is experiential for you.
Yeah. I was laughing as I just heard your responses because my like go-to reaction is like, right? Like, where's it written? Like, oh, come on, Sean, right? Stop being difficult. This is one of the most getting control over the language that comes out of my mouth is one of the most liberating and empowering things that I've done, which is why I think it's so easy for me to be ruthless, right? And come hard at my clients with this because it's so powerful. But I'm gonna be real. It's annoying.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to this day, I don't like it when people use it on me either. It's like, no, this is just for me to use on you, not for you to use on me. So it can be annoying. And on the other side of that annoyance and irritation is massive liberation, as you said. I like that word. And just control, right? Control over our language. I think a lot of times we don't recognize how many different inputs our language has. You know, we'll say things that our parents said, we'll say things that our siblings said, we'll say things that our mentors say or our heroes say. And when we're not aware of it, the language just becomes unconsciously disempowering most of the time.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Unconscious disempowerment. Mm.
Yep.
You make me angry.
How specifically do I make you angry? How would it look if I made you happy? How do you know that you are angry? How does anything I'm doing cause you to choose to feel anger? Now that last one is got to be used inside of rapport. One of the things that we talked about before we started to film here is this can kind of feel like narcissism or gaslighting if I'm turning it over to you, right? Like, you make me feel angry. Well, how are you making yourself feel angry? And that might feel like I'm not doing it, you're doing it. And so it's critical that these are used with care in the appropriate relationship. And sometimes even in coaching, we might not want to use something like that. I mean, that's part of what coaching is understanding the human that you're coaching and when this human needs this angle or when the human needs that angle. And this might be something that you decide your client absolutely needs so that they can take on ownership and responsibility of their feelings, or it might be the exact opposite. If this is a client that's dealt with narcissism and had this gaslighting experience, then this might be the worst thing that you can say to them because it might trigger something that actually makes them even more angry back. So I know this is something that you were really aware of earlier today when we were talking about it. Is there more you want to speak to on that?
I think it's just the recognizing the situation, honoring the individual, and this is not like a hard like coming at them one after the other after the other after the other. It's being mindful of the person and of, like Sean said, that word rapport is so important, and where they're at in their personal growth journey, what they are in this moment, right? What they're ready to handle. And this is, some of the art of coaching and not just the science. For me, it's about the context, right? So if I'm doing this inside of a relationship where there's no permission, this is not a coaching session, I don't have any leverage established, then absolutely it can come across as me being condescending or better than, or high and mighty, and that can cause like an irritation or a rift inside of a relationship. And I imagine if it goes too far, it can cause there to be no more relationship, because we're using this in a context that it wasn't established that this was for. And so when we're doing this with our clients, I also think it's important that, you hear Sean just repeating some of these questions one after the other, but I don't do that in a coaching session. It might be one of these things. And then really giving that space for the client to be able to ponder that and to really think about that, and maybe asking another, but it's not going to come like hard hitting one after the other after the other.
Yeah, rapid fire. That's a really good point. So as we teach this, a lot of it is being taught like that, just rapid fire. You could say this, you could say this, you could say this. And what I want after this video is for you to essentially open up your permission to be a ruthless challenger of language, because you know how to do that. These aren't things that you need to memorize. You don't have to remember that when somebody says, "You make me angry," there are 3 responses that you can choose from. If you're just in presence with another human in conversation and you just open up your curiosity, then anything that doesn't make crystal clear sense to you will cause you to challenge it, because you're just paying attention as ruthlessly as you possibly can. So we all have this questioning ability inside of us. It's just that most of us have gotten it programmed out of us, or maybe even beaten out of us, whether it's figuratively or potentially literally. So we've been taught that it's not okay to challenge, usually with our parents or some kind of parental figure that we looked up to that told us to stop asking me questions. The irritation was just too much. And why do you always have to say this? So we come out of the womb essentially a questioning machine, because we're questioning the world. And then early on in our life, we usually have this part stopped inside of us, right? It stops evolving. So what I want you to get out of this is to re-engage that part that naturally will ask questions. I don't understand what that means, and what does that mean, and what about this, and how about this, and all the time does it work that way, or what if you weren't angry, and what if you were happy? Going back to this one question about angry, the last one I said is, how does anything I'm doing cause you to choose to feel angry? What we're doing with a lot of these questions is we're embedding empowerment even though it might not show up as empowerment because it might show up as irritation inside the client, you understanding that you are the only one that can make yourself angry, that's really empowering. While you're angry, you might not want to hear it because it's easy to just blame somebody else and just sit in that place of kind of temper tantrum at times. And sometimes our job as a coach is just let the temper tantrum happen. But a lot of these questions are embedding, even though it can be confronting and irritating sometimes, we're embedding empowering messages. And I think that's where the intention of what we're doing here really matters. And that's what distinguishes this from any kind of mind manipulation or narcissism or gaslighting. Even though a lot of the questions and words might sound similar, we're actually embedding empowerment. We're embedding liberation, right? And even sometimes the client might not really get in the moment that he or she is creating the anger. Later on, that might be a seed that blossoms. And then they might recognize that they are creating whatever the feelings that they're creating. So how can I create less of the ones I don't want to experience, and how can I create more of the ones that I do want to experience? So as long as we have that come from of empowerment and liberation, then these questions are massively powerful. And I would say even when they're irritating, maybe more irritation is even more liberating, right? Like the things that we really need to learn are oftentimes the things that we resist learning the most. All right, let's jump back in. And you might, if you haven't noticed this, I'm looking down here. That's where Michelle is. And we've got her up there on the video. We're doing a remote training here.
I love it. He's always busy. He is important.
Always busy? Are there ever any times when he's not busy? What does busy even look like? What do you see in him that causes you to assess that he's busy? And why does busy necessarily mean important? And what are the things that are important to him in the moment when he's busy? What are the things that are not important to him in the moment when he's busy? If a client makes a statement like that, it will probably be in some kind of a disempowered way, like, I'm not important enough when he's busy because he's busy with all these other things, and therefore I'm not important. And sometimes we might want to challenge that a little bit and go, is it possible that he's busy to take care of the things that are urgent so that he can make room for what's important, such as the date with you or whatever it is, is the context of the question.
So good. If she realized how much that hurt me, she wouldn't do it.
How do you know she doesn't realize? Is it possible that she does realize it and you don't know she realized it? How would she know that she realized it? How do you know that it hurts you? What are you pretending to know or not know to make what she's realizing or not realizing hurtful to you? How are you creating hurt in your life and projecting it onto her? So I'm just throwing all kinds of stuff at you. And again, I want you to just open up the permission to question every single word. Sometimes the same word can be questioned multiple times from different angles, but we want to question every single word with a challenge. Here's another one. Why don't you want to read that one, the bottom one there that I didn't say?
Yeah. Oh, how do you know she could stop doing it?
That's a really, really powerful one. So many times our clients are irritated because somebody in their life is not stopping a certain behavior or not doing a behavior that we want them to do. And the idea of capacity when it relates to behavior is so powerful because it's essentially just like short-circuiting, right? So if we're angry that somebody is continuing to do something that they don't have the capacity to stop, then how much longer are we going to get angry at them, right? One of the analogies that, I don't remember when this came to me, I think it came to me in a conversation with my wife like 10 years ago or so, dealing with somebody in her life that she was really frustrated with, is this idea of the ice cream machine. So if you are at a restaurant that has an ice cream machine and you really have your heart and your stomach set on chocolate ice cream, you grab your bowl and you go up to the ice cream machine and you flip the little switch and the ice cream comes out and it's vanilla. But you want chocolate. How long will you stand in front of that ice cream machine and get angry that it's not producing chocolate? How long will you allow the vanilla ice cream to keep going into your bowl before you shut it off? Will you yell at the ice cream? Will you yell at the switch? Will you yell at the machine? Will you yell at everybody around that you want chocolate ice cream? Or will you step back and look at the sign that probably says vanilla? In that scenario, nobody would literally get angry and punch the machine or yell or whatever because it's a vanilla ice cream machine. It doesn't have the capacity to produce chocolate, meaning it doesn't have the capacity to produce what you want it to produce. When we're dealing with humans, that capacity is not necessarily a physical thing. Does that human face have the ability to form certain words with their mouth? Yes. But do they have the emotional capacity in this moment? Do they have the awareness of what can be done? A lot of people don't realize that they can even change the way they're seeing the world. They don't realize there are multiple perspectives on the planet. Does this human have the evolutionary capacity to make the changes that you're expecting them to make? Most of the time, the answer will be no. They don't have the capacity. If they did, they would. And oftentimes, even if they do, it's helpful for the client to just decide that they don't, so the client doesn't stay in front of the vanilla machine screaming to try to get chocolate. Sometimes on the other side of the vanilla machine, it says chocolate, but yelling at it is not the way to produce chocolate. Sometimes understanding that right now the machine is producing vanilla and backing up and accepting the vanilla in its vanilla-ness in that moment is actually the way for the machine to go, I think this particular person wants chocolate. So let me go ahead and change the sign. Let me go ahead and shift the things it needs to shift, and I can produce chocolate. So I believe that humans can make changes if we're talking about literally. I also believe that most humans don't have the capacity to make the changes that they're currently not making. And this is all keeping the client in control, keeping the client in charge and not projecting irritation around something that they don't control. Anything you want to add to that?
No, or blaming themselves, right? If I was better, if I was different, if I was prettier, taller, smarter, then I would be able to get chocolate out of this machine that produces vanilla ice cream. It's about keeping that client at choice and in that place of empowerment. I cannot stress that enough, because if it's everybody else's fault, right? And there's a big distinction between like fault and blame and just taking that choice and responsibility. And if it's everybody's fault, if all these people need to be different, if it's his fault that I'm angry or his fault that, how I feel, then I'm not in an empowered place. And my advocacy for my clients is actually not about right and wrong. It's about empowerment and about choice. So it's not the right wrong discussion for me is irrelevant inside of this conversation. It might be relevant in a different conversation, but here it's just about empowerment. And if you're just going to throw a fit or cry on the floor or be depressed or kick things and break things because you're not getting what you want to get from the machine, that's not helping you at all. So whether it's true or not true or right or not wrong or wrong or fair or unfair, to me, none of that actually matters. Is it producing in you the result that you want? And if it's not, then just choose to believe that they are doing the best that they can. They're operating at full capacity. And I want to help my clients find another machine, right? To get what it is. Their desire for chocolate is valid. let's find another place to be able to get that, which we cannot do. We can't be exposed to other solutions when we're operating in that place of blame and shame and guilt.
Yeah, that piece, that last piece, I'm glad you went there. When we are blaming and shaming other people and finding fault, our attention is really all about the problem usually, rather than opening up. And so if we don't throw the tantrum, we might actually see that there is a chocolate machine somewhere else, or somebody else has chocolate and maybe willing to change or trade with us or something. So this isn't about shut down, right or wrong. It's also not about walking away and pretending you don't want the chocolate. And in the real world with these situations, it's not about just condoning what somebody will do or not do, especially if you're in a relationship with them. So if somebody is doing something or not doing something that's not working for you inside the relationship, most of the time, it's actually better to produce a behavior change when we're not blaming them for it. So when we do kind of step back and go, this is probably the production of full capacity, as Michelle said, then we can embrace it instead of deny it or instead of beat ourselves up. And then we can have a clean, clear conversation about what would work better for you, rather than you always do this or you're wrong in this scenario. And any kind of right-wrong tug of war inside of a relationship usually doesn't produce what either one wants. And then, if one person has tugged the rope to their side, well then at some point in time, the other person is going to tug it back. And then you're just in this perpetual dance of who's in control or who's right or who has the power and who can demean the other to get that upper hand. And that pattern is not ever going to create connection the way that you're wanting. So we fully believe that right or wrong is essentially defined as, is it producing what you want? Are the words producing what you want? Are your actions producing what you want? Is this view of the world producing what you want? Is this behavior or belief rather that you have producing what you want? It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't necessarily matter where it came from. I mean, those things are important if we're going to change it, but we don't need to look back on blame or I've been doing this for a long time, I shouldn't be this way, or I'm an adult, I shouldn't be worried about or still carrying around this childhood trauma or whatever the thing. None of those judgments around what is will help us produce what we want to be. And it requires us to back away from our vicious commitment to our stories and specifically to being right, that will give us our own capacity to change, or just accept what is, love what is, appreciate what is, and be happier than when we're trying to turn the vanilla ice cream machine into a chocolate producing machine. All right, next page. That was a good conversation.
Yeah. I never get noticed.
Come on, Michelle, never. We challenge absolutes like
always
ad nauseum, right? Because absolutes are never right. They're never right, except that one that I just said. Absolutes and universals, always, never, nobody, everybody. We have to challenge this because it's extremely rare that we use a universal like that that's actually true and or benefits us. But we can convince ourselves that absolutes and universals are real and true and valid because our brain has the ability to say, take this belief and find all the evidence that matches it and discard all the evidence that doesn't. And so we might have a situation where 95% of the evidence out there doesn't match our belief, but our brain only takes the 5% that does, puts it over here on this table, and only looks at that. And therefore, if I'm only looking at this 5%, and then the 5% becomes the entire universe that I'm looking at, then it feels like my absolute is true. And just the way that our beliefs work, very rarely do we do that with empowering, expansive beliefs. Because the concept of taking 5% and only looking at it as though it's the whole thing doesn't match the concept of expansiveness and understanding all the different perspectives that there are in the world and all the different variations. So those two energies don't match, which is why it's very rare that we are fixated on a small percentage of evidence that actually supports us living a happy life. So anytime you hear never, always, everybody, you just said you had a conversation with a client just today, wasn't it, on one of your coaching calls?
Absolutely. And she was speaking about how her husband always does this thing. And I just asked her, is there ever a time that he doesn't? And what was fascinating to me in that moment is her response was immediate. She didn't even have to think about it. She was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. So it's not, then it's
I
not.
mean, just your response right there is like, okay, like what do we do with that? Like she says, he always does this or he never does that. When questioned, she immediately goes to the opposite as though it sounds like most of the time he does the opposite, and yet she just nevered it or she just always it. And yet when questioned, it's like, oh, of course, like all the time. So that just speaks to how unconscious we are with our language and how disempowering it is.
Yeah. Oh.
I know you've heard me tell this story a lot. There's a woman many years ago that asked me if I could, if I had any ideas to help her grandson, I think, or one of her family members, I think it was her grandson, stop stuttering. She said, he's a stutterer. And I said, how often does he not stutter? And just the question itself sort of threw her for a loop. I could tell because she like squinched up her eyebrows a little bit, like, I don't know, I never thought about it that way. And I said, yeah, because you call him a stutterer. So if you're calling him a stutterer, why would you ever consider the times that he doesn't stutter? And she goes, oh, I never thought about that either. And then she goes, now that you ask me, he probably only stutters like 5 or 10% of the time. And what was interesting about that is even though I asked the question, how often does he not stutter? She answered the other one. How often does he stutter? But at least I'm a math guy, so I know if he only stutters 5 to 10% of the time, that means he doesn't stutter 90 to 95% of the time. So then my line of questioning was, what is he doing when he's not stuttering? And then the immediate shift in her was amazing. It's like, oh, wow, he's having fun. He's enjoying himself. He never stutters when he's doing this activity. I don't remember right now what the activity is, but like when he's playing games or when he's doing puzzles or when he's doing all these things. All right, great. So let's start with when he's not stuttering, which is his natural state. And then let's language the other thing different. And now let's look at what's happening when he chooses to stutter. And I would intentionally embed the word choose, even though it's probably not his conscious choice. But then, which is actually extremely common for the language pattern of stuttering, it's when he's nervous. All right, great. Now, what is it that causes him to feel nervous? What's he doing? What's his body doing? What's going on in the world around him? Is he on his own? Does he feel like he has support? Is it about a subject that he's nervous about? Does he feel like he's not prepared? Then we can go in and use the power of questioning to identify what's the recipe that is present when this human starts to stutter. But that's the anomaly. That's the uncommon piece. And then if we know that he's generally not a stutterer, then how can we change some of the elements of that recipe to the overall recipe that he's following when he's not stuttering? That's the kind of shift that people can have when we bring their awareness to, it's like this bigger universe that they weren't looking at. And in the case of my story and Michelle's client, usually they're always or never or constrictive kind of labels is actually a very, very small percentage of the time. And then quite often we have those responses like, so why are we calling him a stutter then? You know, a stutterer, or why are you alwaysing that? Anyway, such a powerful attack on universals.
It allows us to see where the actual problem is instead of focusing on what we believe the problem is and then trying to solve what actually isn't the problem. It really illuminates on where the actual issue is, and then we can look at the non-issue and then add more of that intentionally into the recipe, which is so powerful. And just what your client said, right? I've never thought about that before. And that's what we're doing with these questions, is offering up a new perspective. Most humans do not speak this way or communicate this way. So we're giving them, it's like we're shifting their perspective around their problem and allowing them to see it from a different perspective. So powerful.
Yeah, which is where all of the solutions lie. All of them. That one might actually be true. And we got to tell people to subscribe. I always forget to tell people to subscribe. So,
yeah, subscribe to the channel.
Yeah.
Be a part of the community, spread the word.
Everybody should be subscribed. Okay.
Always. They should always be subscribing.
Always on every video. Subscribe every single video. Yeah. Subscribe again.
I have to stop spending.
This is one of my favorite ones. What would happen if you didn't stop spending? What would happen if you did stop spending? Says who? Anytime anybody has a have to or a should or a need to, we can always challenge the source. Says who? What wouldn't happen if you didn't stop spending? Or what wouldn't happen if you did stop spending? And don't you have to spend on something? They'll probably say, well, of course, I need food. Or, okay, great. So then what is it that you're... What's that?
I said, that's not what I meant.
Yeah, right. So when we challenge that, a lot of times that's the response. Well, that's not what I meant. Well, it's exactly what you said. So what is it that you want to stop spending on? And then we can find the distinctions rather than just this universal of I've got to stop spending. And if people are telling themselves, I need to stop spending, and it's this vague universal like that, then anytime they put money out for anything, they're offending this rule that they want to now abide by. So it's powerful to understand. And then, of course, the power comes in changing this, to understand how often we shut ourselves down with these vague rules because we don't give ourselves the ability to discern. Of course, spending money is okay. At times, you have to spend money. But now let's identify where you want to stop spending money. And even inside of there, we can question what's valuable to spend money on and what's valuable to stop spending money on. And then what do you want to spend your money on that you're not spending your money on right now? Maybe putting it into a savings account or spending it on experiences with your family or something. So that's the power of discernment that we're getting here.
I can't answer that question.
You can't answer what question? How do you know you can't answer the question? If you could answer the question, what would you say? Oh, there was another one that came but went. Do you got anything else on that one? I can't answer that question.
Did you say, how do you know you can't?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. I think this is the one that came to me. How do you can't answer the question?
Oh, ugh.
See that? Was that an embodied response right there?
Ugh. Is it appropriate to tell you to shut up on this video? That's how I feel, like over here.
Oh, ugh.
Like, how do I know that I what? What did you say?
So what we're doing here is we're saying there's a pattern called...
Trauma is what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. What we're looking at here is taking a look at the pattern called can't stop. And instead of focusing on stopping, we're trying to focus on what we call the not pattern of can't stop. So what does that actually look like? Can't stop. And this is such a brain teasing, unscrambling kind of question because of the response that Michelle just gave. It's irritating. Like, what do you mean? How do I not do something? Our brain is not designed to even work in the not patterns or the not behaviors, which is why it's so powerful to go in there. And so what I'm looking for is, when you're not spending, what are you doing? Are you not on the computer, or are you on the computer and you're just not hitting put in cart? Or are you spending time on something else? Or are you smoking? Or are you avoiding with some other, sabotaging behavior pattern? How are we doing this thing called can't stop spending? And that takes us into a whole other universe of options. And I realize I changed the can't answer the question to can't stop spending, but it's essentially the same essence here.
Yeah, annoying either way. This is appropriate. There is no understanding here.
How would you know if there was? What do you mean there's no understanding? Understanding of what? Where's here? Is it your here? Is it my here? What are you choosing not to understand? How do you know I don't understand exactly what's going on here? Nothing annoying about any of those, right?
No. Ugh. It's so good though. And that feeling, that's so important, right? Just that disruption, that positive disruption. It's cool that it's annoying, and it's good. It's necessary. It means that it's poking.
That's a good thing to unpack here just a little bit. As a transformational coach, you have to be willing to create disruption. Because what we're doing is we are pulling things off that we've been holding, or the client has been holding on to for so long. A lot of times they don't recognize they've been holding on to it. A lot of times they don't recognize that there is a thing that they've been holding on to, or that they can let it go. And so when we're asking these questions, we're essentially peeling away things that people have been connected to for days, weeks, months, years, decades. Most of the time it's decades when we're doing this kind of questioning, right? We're really questioning the source of things and the core of beliefs and behaviors. So when you do feel the resistance in the form of, or this is so annoying, and why don't you stop, or I don't want to ask that question, or they start talking in this, kind of a snarky sort of tone, that means there's disruption here. And on the other side of disruption is an eruption of something better that the client really truly wants to experience in their life. So you have to be willing to do the things that could produce discomfort. We don't do this in order to make people mad, but we know that sometimes the process of transformation is going to make people mad, or it's going to be uncomfortable. And it's really about how they relate to the idea of and the process of discomfort.
And questions, how we relate to questions in general.
And let me just say, you've totally mastered the willingness to irritate. So bow down to you.
Is that embodied?
Yes.
How do you know that I've mastered it? Define mastered.
Oh, I know.
He lied.
How do you know? Yeah. How do you know he lied? How specifically did he lie? Who gets to choose what's a lie and what's truthful? Is it possible that he doesn't believe he's lying? Is it possible that you're the one that's lying? Compared to what? What is the idea of truth? Have you ever lied? Oh, that's a good one. I saw your eyebrows just raise.
Yeah.
Like, we're putting other people on trial for the things that we're doing. That's a shutdown pretty quickly. Either a shutdown or a trigger of an outburst.
Yeah. I love the word outburst. I think of it as the like just teenager, right? Like stomping their feet and
Right.
throwing like a,
Rah!
yeah, absolutely. Like, I love it. Bring her on. I am unhappy.
Just pray for our spouses, pray for our friends.
We talked about that earlier today because I knew we were going to have this conversation. I was like, do you remember when I was really annoying?
Right now in this moment, I just have so much compassion for everybody who deals with me. But I think I do a decent job of turning it on and off, but who gets to decide decent, right? Anyway. And my son has totally become exactly that, which I think is hilarious. So when he's doing it to other people, they don't like it all that much, but I think it's fantastic. Not fantastic and not okay when he's doing it to me, though, right? There's times and ways to use this, dear son.
Man.
All right. What'd you say? I am unhappy?
I am unhappy.
How are you unhappy? How do you know that you're not happy? That's a good one to unpack. We'll unpack that in a second. What would happy even look like? When did you choose to start being unhappy? How do you do unhappy? What does that sound like? What does that look like? Do you talk a certain way? Do you walk a certain way? Do you breathe a certain way? Show me unhappy. If I was going to substitute for you and I was going to do unhappy just like you do unhappy, teach me. What would I need to do? What would I need to think? What would I need to say? How would I need to talk to other people? Like, just really unpack this idea of unhappy. And I don't remember what I said we were going to unpack.
Yeah. Sorry, I just became very aware that my jaw was really tight, and
How tight? How do you know it's tight? Compared to what?
Right.
Sometimes we just go, right.
Yeah, you're right.
The idea, what I wanted to unpack is just the idea of unhappy, and when did we choose? How do we know we're unhappy? How do we know we're not happy? Have we ever been happy before? And are we comparing this, whatever the conditions are, to something that's unrealistic? What's happening in your life to make you decide that you're unhappy? Like, just understanding what produces happiness and what produces unhappiness is where I would go with something like this. And it's really transformational when we unpack that.
So good. They don't come here anymore.
Who's they? How often do they come here, or did they come here before? Is it possible that they come here when you're not here? Why do you think you stop noticing when they do show up? Is it important that they come here more often? What are you making it mean about yourself that they don't come here anymore? Is it possible that they shouldn't come here anymore? Like, just completely diving in on just like the meaning of they don't come here, right? What does it mean about them that they don't come here anymore? Do you know they're still alive? Do you know they have the capacity to come here and they're choosing not to? If they are choosing to not come here, could it be a good thing? What is this allowing you to do that you wouldn't have been able to do if they did come here and invade your space?
Is it possible that they will come again?
That's a good one.
Yeah. Ooh. It's more or less a good thing.
More or less compared to what? It's more than what? It's less than what? A good thing compared to who? Or compared to what? Or who says it's a good thing? What's good defined as? What's a thing? What does this good thing even mean in your life? More or less. Tell me about that. Tell me how it's more or less. To me, when I hear something like more or less a good thing, that's such a passive statement. It sounds like resignation. It sounds like settling. It sounds like, okay. So I would want to dive in with, what do you actually want in your life? Right? Do you want this good thing? Or is this something that you've just settled because this is the best you're ever going to get? Anything you want to add to that last one?
Just as I heard the words coming out of my mouth, my thought was, what does that even mean? Like, what are you actually, like, what are you saying? Like, I genuinely was like, I don't even get the words that just came out of my mouth.
Yeah. What does that even mean? I mean, that's the essence of everything we're talking about. It's about opening up this, I keep saying willingness, because it's not a skill set that you need to obtain. It's a permission that you need to give yourself, and in the right context, when appropriate, and with rapport, this is the way to fundamentally transform humans' lives. And this might not make sense to a lot of people, because we think that the way we transform lives, really the way we make any progress, is to bring information to the situation or to bring something that we don't already have. I don't think most of us really truly understand that everything we're wanting and everything that we're needing, the courage that we want, the strength, the answers that we're seeking, the wisdom that we want, almost everything we need to transform at a neurological level is inside of us. So as coaches, if we know that what we're trying to do is get into the elements inside the client, then we do that with questions. We don't do that with our solutions to their problems. We do that by asking questions that will cause them to think about things they haven't thought about before, or answer questions that they've asked but never answered before, or consider perspectives that they never considered before, or dive in and push deeper than they've ever pushed before. These are the kinds of things that we can virtually never do on our own, because we're simultaneously trying to better our life but protect ourselves from danger at the same time. And if we're trying to protect ourselves from danger with all the danger protection mechanisms that we've been holding on to, this is going to be really difficult, in my experience, impossible for a human that's been holding on to these protective mechanisms to go, why don't we start taking these off now? Why don't we start challenging all the things that I've lived with my life hidden behind so that I'm protected from the outdoors, from anything outside of my comfort zone? Why don't I just start peeling those off? It very, very rarely happens that way, which is why we need this external perspective. And Michelle mentioned staying at choice. I said staying in control, I think, earlier. This is really critical to understand that the human is in control. And the human won't change until the human's ready to change. And so a lot of what we do with these questions is just constantly gauge, what about this angle? And it's totally okay for us to ask one of these questions and for it to land flat, for it not to produce what we were hoping it would produce. And then what we do as a coach is just go, that ain't it. Let me ask another thing. Let me ask another thing. Let me come from this angle. Let me put this inside of an analogy. Let me have them switch perspectives and see if their boyfriend thinks the exact same thing that they're saying with their mouth. So we're always just maneuvering, right? We're just playing with the clay. We're poking, we're provoking, we're prodding here and there. We're just asking all these questions. And Michelle was talking about kind of scraping away and just sort of poking. And what's so beautiful and profound to watch as a coach is when we hit that right button and it all just goes, like all the clay just melts away, or the person just rises up and just sees something that they've never seen before. It's so profound to watch, but they have to be ready and they need to make the choice to do it. And I know one of the things you wanted to talk about, Michelle, is that one question that you said was so profound. I don't remember the exact scenario, and you can tell as much of it as you want, but your feeling of when I asked you that question, and well, just you go ahead and tell the story, because you were the one where it all happened inside of.
Yeah. So I had for a very long time more of my life than not. Most of my years on the planet here, I had a belief that I I needed to be perfect, that I could stop when I was perfect, that excellence would be achieved when I was perfect, success would come when I was perfect. So I had this finish line in my mind of perfect. And we were on a coaching call, and you just asked me how I would know when I was done. Like, how would I know that I arrived? And what was really powerful for me is that I didn't have an answer. And I remember you telling me some version of, I'll let you hold on to that, right? Like, I'll let you keep perfection as the goal to achieve if you can tell me when you're done. And I couldn't. And that was a really powerful shift for me to recognize that this goal that I had was operating on a floating finish line. And it was always going to be, always, if I continued this way, that's being used intentionally, going to be a couple feet in front of me. And that it would be something that would just continue for the rest of my life. And yet I was holding on to it like it did have an end, but it didn't. And I was speaking about it and using it as a gauge and a barometer for how I was showing up. And, well, I'll do videos when they're perfect, and I'll write when they're perfect, and I'll publish when it's perfect. But that was never going to happen, because while I was languaging it like there was a deadline, there wasn't one. There was no finish line. And that awareness for me was just a huge shift in recognizing that I'm chasing after this thing that actually doesn't exist. And now I have a choice as to if I want to keep running this race for the rest of my life that I do not actually have the ability to win, because the finish line will forever be a couple of feet in front of me.
That last statement, it'll forever be a couple of feet in front of me. And this pattern shows up in what we call a when I, then I pattern. So when I become perfect, when I lose the weight, when I become ready, when I become successful. And the when I, then I is almost always attached to something that's vague and not defined. If it's not defined, then it will be a forever more. And a lot of us are running around with incompetence beliefs. We're not good enough. We're not smart enough. We're not ready enough. And the enough there is this perpetual, vague, not yet effect that it has on our lives. And so when there's vagueness in some kind of an outcome like that, some kind of a target or a finish line, we need to define that. When will prepared be? When will success be? When will enough money be? I had a client one time, we were talking about money, and she had an opportunity to change jobs, but she didn't want to change jobs. And when we were exploring that, she said, because I don't ever want to be in the situation where I can't pay my bills. And so I don't want to change jobs because it's going to take a few months to land in this other job or this other business opportunity that she was looking at. And I just can't afford to do that. So in exploring that, we looked at where that belief showed up, and it showed up much earlier in her life when she was like late teens or early 20s. And at the time, she was living paycheck to paycheck, and she was taking money and putting it in a savings account so that she could increase the distance that she could survive if she lost a job or if she chose to leave a job. And at the time, it was, I've always got to take money in over here and I can't quit my job. And it was this perpetual, I can't afford this. And then when I asked, how much money do you need in order to survive 3 or 4 months? I don't remember the number at the time. And then she just offered, she goes, I have $3 million saved. But she was so perpetually lost in the I can't because when I, then I, that she didn't realize she passed that finish line literally like 2 decades ago. That's the power in us getting caught in the perpetual vagueness of the comparative, meaning I'm not perfect yet. I need to get more perfect. I need to get more successful. I need to get richer. I need to get thinner. I need to get better. Whatever that better is needs a definition. Otherwise, it will stay disempowering forever. And I'll put that on a universal as well. So hopefully this has been valuable. As I said, this was taken out of our coaching certification. If you're not certified or you are certified and you want to deep dive into our version of neurotransformational coaching, we've got an online program. It's called BCC. You can click the link in the description of the video, or you can go to coachshansmith.com/BCC and check out that particular program and see if it would be a good fit for you. It's a deep, deep dive into the neurotransformational coaching with a lot of these kinds of questions, but understanding how the human brain works and what determines our language patterns, right? Like there's got to be a level of foundational awareness that can inform some of these questions so that you know what to go after to illuminate the beliefs. And then once the beliefs are exposed, what do we do with them, right? You don't want to just open up the beliefs like a can of worms and then, okay, bye, right? So if you're interested in that deep dive, then take a look at that. Thank you, Michelle, for doing this. This is the first time that we've done this like virtual back and forth training, and hopefully it was valuable for you. Is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, thank you for being more concerned with my liberation and advocating for my freedom than being liked. Because it's a lot of this work that you did and the way that you showed up for me for so many years and still show up, that really gave me the permission to speak the way I speak now, to have that control, to recognize that I'm at choice in the things that I am choosing so that I can decide if I want to have a better experience. And for that, I'm just incredibly grateful, even though there were a lot of times, a lot of cuss words that I rolled my eyes and wanted to hang up on you.
I was going to ask that actually. So thank you for that. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, dogs. And and you use it on your clients, right? One of the things that we talked about earlier is just this flow through idea. And Michelle made a statement. She said, I do this work. It's like I don't even do this work for me. I do this work for them. And that kind of advocacy is powerful. You mentioned, you kind of, I had a question as you were talking there. How many times have you sworn at me, mute button, did whatever you did with a voodoo doll or whatever? Is there a count?
No, a lot. And that is a testament for how hard you've come for me. That's what that is to me. And I remember sending you an email where I was like, come on, like bring it, because I know where the come from is. And that's the thing that's so important, right? It's not, there's a difference when it's just to be a jerk, but I know what the come from is, and to see and experience life the way that I see and experience it, my annoyance, my tight jaw, my getting, irritated, all of that is because there's resonance. That wouldn't be happening if it wasn't there. So I appreciate it. You're not allowed to use these words against me in the future, but I do very much appreciate how hard, and it's not just me.
On video.
I know, right? We'll make sure that gets edited out. But I do appreciate how hard you advocate. And truly, I remember sitting at one of our 5-day certifications and hearing you say the words, you cannot be afraid of pissing people off and be a transformational coach. And it's not just doing it for the sake of doing it, it's doing it for their liberation, for hearing what they're saying, hearing what they're not saying, and challenging them so that they loosen up the grip on the stories, because I know, we know that we can let that go and have a different experience of life. So on the record, I am grateful.
Well said. People getting pissed off is a byproduct of the processes that are required to go through for neural transformation.
And subscribe to the channel.
And subscribe, all of you, all the time. Now, if you like this video, check out that video where we discuss more of the conceptual ideas and applications of powerful coaching questions. Because I can't help you unless I know you. I can't help guide you to the questions, or to the answers rather, with my questions, unless I understand what we're dealing with.